Hey, good morning. I'm Mike Hoover, Assistant Director, Economic Development for the City of Surprise, co-chair for the WESTMARC Economic Development Committee. It's an honor to have this program here today. Senator wrote a nice little script for me to introduce the moderator. Before I do, I want to talk a little bit about what economic developers need to be thinking about, what hopefully we're starting to do. A lot of people reference kind of COVID as a seminal moment in their personal lives, professional lives, but for me it's still the Great Recession, because there was so much hope in the West Valley for major growth, and then it all kind of shut off during the Great Recession. And so you had a very pro-business model in the 2010s. You know, let's develop, let's grow, let's move forward. And that really kind of went all the way up into almost 2020. But we had a project that came to us in the City of Surprise in 2016, 2017. Household name, great company, kind of a fun marketing company. I wanted to build a major industrial project. And they partnered with the landowner, partnered with the local developer. The broker who had been representing that property for almost 12 years was super excited. And these are close professional colleagues, and some of them even friends. And as these pro-business economic developers started to look at this project, we started to go, wait a second, this is 7 to 8 times our water allocation per acre. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, we had a close working relationship with our water director and started talking to them about it. And then we said, let's engage in a solutions-based approach that can still bring this company in and have success all around. And that did not happen. I think one of the things with the pro-business model is people are mistaking kindness for weakness. And I'm very proud of the Surprise City Council, very proud of our water director, but most proud of our economic development director, where directors go and seek projects, actually stood back and said, is this right for our community? The West Valley is open for business, but that should not be at the demise of legacy portfolio development, infrastructure, amazing relationships we built for incumbent businesses that are trying to change state law, when really it's a private business decision that should be made. So I say that because my economic development colleagues are engaged and they need to be supported, and when you have questions on how they're doing business, feel free to ask them. And if they're sheepish or shy, call the City of Surprise. We're glad to barge our way into any West Valley meeting and support those efforts. Okay, so speaking of efforts, the panel one moderator, I'll get back to script now, Senator, that was my stump speech. But we've come a long way since 2017. And this really is where the rubber hits the road, is how are we making these decisions on these projects that ultimately call the West Valley home. Okay, so thank you again, Brenda. Another round of applause for our keynote speaker for 2023. I now want to introduce the panel one moderator who's going to kick off a Water 101 discussion. Please help me welcome the director of the Kyle Center for Water Policy and Morrison Institute at Arizona State University, Sarah Porter.
Good morning. What a wonderful presentation by General Manager Berman. I was thumbing through the little water words for the layperson. That's going to be really helpful. I have 15 minutes to cram you full of knowledge of water so that you can ask intelligent questions of our distinguished panels coming up. So what I'd like to do, and there's an extra fun challenge here that I can't see the screen. So anyway, yeah, I'm from the Kyle Center for Water Policy, which is part of Morrison Institute for Public Policy, Arizona's premier nonpartisan think tank based at ASU. And the Kyle Center has provided a resource for you, because you're going to leave today and say, there's a lot about water that I still want to know. And you can ask me for a bookmark to remind you. You can go to the Arizona Water Blueprint. It is a hub of water policy information that the Kyle Center has created. So we're going to start with a few water basics. We'll go through this really fast. First, Arizona has more than one source of water supply, which I think you heard from Brenda. We have Colorado River water, we have in-state surface water, we have groundwater, that's water that's pumped up from the aquifers, well water. And we also have reclaimed water. That's water that was put into the wastewater treatment system and then treated up fit for purpose to be used again. Now, one of these sources of supply is not like the others, and that is groundwater. All of the other sources of supply can be regarded as renewable. That is, we have an expectation that we'll use it and where it came from will be replenished. Even reclaimed water, we're very good at replenishing our supply of reclaimed water. Groundwater is different. In an arid place like Arizona, when we are good at pumping water out of the ground much faster than nature replenishes it. And so it is a constant water supply challenge for the state of Arizona to manage groundwater in a way that doesn't create reliance on a finite resource that someday we come to regret, like building cities on non-renewing resources. More about that later. Arizona, this is Greater Phoenix's water supplies. The portfolio is a little different from the state of Arizona. It would not be a surprise, I think, to any of you to learn that the in-state surface water system managed by SRP, the Salt Verde system, is a big part of Greater Phoenix's portfolio. And then, is that what I'm showing? Yeah, here we go. Now, this is a lawyer creating an infographic, but essentially, a lot of times people think that water law, water policy is super complex, but there's a key to understanding water policy in Arizona. And the key is that the source of supply has its own set of rules and regulations that controls how you can use it, whether you can transfer it, all kinds of questions, use it or lose it rules, all of those things. So each of these sources of supply that you see here has its own set of rules governing how it's used. And that's what makes water policy a little bit complicated. In addition, water is a local matter. And by that I mean that each water provider, whether it's a city or a town or a private water company like EPCOR or Global Water, each of those providers is responsible for securing and maintaining and managing its own water portfolio. And this is important because it means when we are thinking about things like shortages of Colorado River water or managing groundwater sustainably, the impacts are not the same. So the only factoid that I would like to add to what she masterfully presented is that Arizona has an allocation of 2.8 million acre feet of Colorado River water in a non-shortage year. 1.2 million acre feet of that water is used by water users along the main stem. A lot of it goes to Yuma, a lot of it goes to the Colorado River Indian tribes near Lake Havasu. 1.6 million acre feet of that water would come to central Arizona in a non-shortage year. And very famously, when Arizona needed the support of the delegation of California to vote in favor of federal financing for the CAP, Arizona agreed that the CAP water users would take junior priority in the case of a shortage. And that means that now in these discussions about what do we do with a smaller river than was allocated, central Arizona, if we stuck to strict priority, would sustain much bigger shortages. Theoretically, all of that Colorado River water could be shorted. That's why we're negotiating. We don't want that to happen. I'm sorry, okay, I think I'm ahead of myself in my slides. SRP is a very different system. It's an in-state surface water system, as Brenda discussed. One of the things that's interesting about SRP is that the water right for SRP was decreed by a territorial court back in 1910, and the right is connected to the land. So most of the water, not quite all of it, but most of the water that SRP manages is constrained to what are called the project lands, and the cities you see in the pop-up box are cities that have land in the project lands. Here's a blow-up. I think I'm showing you a blow-up from the Arizona Water Blueprint that shows you the SRP project plans. This creates this interesting challenge for cities that are experiencing most of their growth not on project lands. For many cities, including Phoenix, including lots of cities in the East and West Valley, growth is occurring off project lands because the project lands tend to be the older, more settled, more costly land areas of those cities. And that means that the challenges related to the Colorado River are often translated into challenges for water for growth for cities. All right, and then finally, a word about groundwater. We hear these stories about communities that are having their wells go dry because of big industrial agricultural operations coming in and drilling new wells and using up the groundwater. Well, that cannot happen in the places that are in the colorful blobs on this map. The green blobs are called active management areas, and within active management areas, and of course that includes Phoenix, it includes Tucson, within active management areas, groundwater is highly regulated. There's essentially a cap and trade system for groundwater for cities and municipal providers. There are rules that push growth to be urban growth, to be on renewable supplies. There's a prohibition on new irrigated agriculture. There is mandatory conservation for every sector that is stepped up every 10 years. So highly regulated groundwater in these areas. In the orange blobs, those are irrigation non-expansion areas. Those are areas where there's a prohibition on new irrigated agriculture. So these are the places in the state of Arizona where those horror stories about wells going dry won't occur because there's an orderly management, there's metering, there's reporting of water use. It's outside of the AMAs where you hear about those stories. And I only bring that up because that is so much in the news and so much on people's minds. So with a couple more minutes, let me talk a little bit about demand. No surprise, Arizona, the largest water using sector in the state of Arizona is agriculture. It really has been forever because it takes a lot of water to grow food and fiber. It might be a surprise to you when you think about how many people in the state of Arizona live in cities to realize that municipal water use only comprises 22% of statewide demand, and industrial water use only 6%. Industrial includes power production, power generation, and mines, two of the bigger industrial users. Brenda already talked about what an acre-foot of water is, so let me just show you how the Phoenix AMA, the Phoenix Active Management Area, breaks down. Not surprisingly, municipal use is the biggest source of demand in the Phoenix AMA, just not probably what you would expect. And then finally, I keep saying and finally because I want to call my panel up in just a minute, but I'm going to take a couple extra minutes to talk for a moment about demand trends. And I think this is probably going to be the most positive and optimistic takeaway of the day. This is a graphic from the Department of Water Resources that shows the decoupling of population growth and economic development from water demand. And your takeaway is that population growth and economic growth are not drivers of shortage. They're not the reason for shortage on the Colorado River. They are not the reason for these challenges that are so much in the news. You can see that this graphic shows that the population of Arizona has grown 5.5 times since the mid-50s. The economy has grown 21 times, and yet our water demand now statewide is slightly below what it was in the mid-1950s. So an important takeaway. Likewise, in the CAP service area, water use, remember that would be the Phoenix to Tucson area, the orange line, third line down, shows water demand by municipal users over about a 20-year period. In this 20-year period, the population of the CAP service area grew 45%. But without any push to keep water demand, to push water demand down, the water demand, entire water demand for the area grew only 14%. So your takeaway is that we can have more population, we can have more economic development on the water supplies we have if we manage them properly, if we pay attention to land use, if we pay attention to what we allocate water for. So what has Arizona got right? The biggest thing, in my opinion, that Arizona got right was passing the Groundwater Management Act in 1980. That's why we have those active management areas and INAs. The Groundwater Management Act is what made Arizona a good bet for investment. We have a program in the Groundwater Management Act in which cities can take control of their destiny by demonstrating to the Department of Water Resources that they have a 100-year supply of water for their projected growth within the period of the designation. And almost all the cities in the valley are designated cities, of the larger cities. This water blueprint graphic is going to show you the cities in the valley and then the cities that have designations. The cities that have a lot of growth that are looking to be designated currently, they're just two, Buckeye and Queen Creek. And they're working on getting their designations. But this designation means that when we have this water news, like shortages on the Colorado River or groundwater fully allocated, these cities still have a runway to continue to grow because they are every 15 years or so, they are demonstrating over and over again that they have a 100-year supply of water for their growth. Outside of designated cities, if a developer wants to develop a subdivision of 6 or more homes, the developer is required to demonstrate to the Department of Water Resources a 100-year supply of water for that development. And when we have news about groundwater in subbasins being fully allocated, that creates a challenge for developers that had planned to rely on groundwater in that basin for their development. But that challenge is not the same in designated cities because those cities have proved up their supplies. I think I have so much more to share with you, but I think I better end it there because I want to make sure that we have time to go through questions with our distinguished panel.